Welcome, everyone, and thank you again for joining us this morning for the fourth of our five-part Turn the Page STL webinar series, our Community Needs Assessment. My name is Lisa Greening, and I'm the project manager of Turn the Page STL. Just a few housekeeping details, just like every week. Introduce yourself in the chat box. All happy shout-outs are welcome and encouraged. All webinar attendees who are participating are in listen-only mode during this webinar to avoid background noises or other distractions. However, we highly encourage you to actively engage with your thoughts, ideas in the chat box. And if you have any questions for the presenters, please type them in the Q&A box. Kylie Bednar and Brunea Lester with UMSL have joined us again and will be responding to your chats and questions. This webinar will be recorded today, and a link will be sent to you via email next week, including the slide deck and other resources that we discussed today. Also, if I can remember, at the end of this webinar, there will be a short poll, and we hope you will provide us with feedback to help us improve our webinar series. So welcome. We had 5 strategic themes that emerged from the data through a racial equity lens about how a child cannot be reading proficiently by the end of 3rd grade. The 5 factors or themes that we pulled out from the quantitative and qualitative data that we discussed the past couple of weeks. Themes included, number 1, children were entering kindergarten not ready to read. There was a lack of kindergarten readiness. Another big strategic thing was family engagement, getting our families engaged in the education of their children. Teacher preparedness, especially for our K-3 teachers on how to teach reading, was a big part of what we collected with our data. And the last 2 is summer learning, that summer slide, that so much affects our youngest and lowest income students. And attendance, including not only coming to school, but coming to school on time during that important first period class, which is your English language arts class, but also mobility rates. So today, we are going to be focusing on 2 of the 5 factors, kindergarten readiness and family engagement. Next week, we will tackle the last 3. Kindergarten readiness. The national research shows that fewer children from low-income families, less than half, are ready for school at kindergarten entry, compared to 3/4 of children from families with moderate or high incomes. For children from low-income families, preschool attendance is one of the strongest factors in school readiness. A follow-up report by the Abecedarian Project found that by entering school ready to learn can improve one's chances of reaching middle class status by age 40. When we went and talked with superintendents, educators, and looked at the research right here in St. Louis, it pointed to the importance of students attending quality early childhood programs to be ready to learn when they enter kindergarten. Kindergarten teachers noted that students who attend a quality pre-K program are much more successful learners in kindergarten. Families warmly discussed how quality early programs have benefited both their children and their family. With that, I am very pleased to introduce Dr. Katie Ron, the Executive Director of Southside Early Childhood Center. We have invited her to talk about the importance of kindergarten readiness and 3rd grade reading proficiency. Katie holds a bachelor's degree in early childhood education and a master's degree in curriculum and instruction, as well as a doctorate in educational leadership and policy. She's worked in the field of early childhood as a classroom teacher, center administrator, consultant, and a college instructor. She is especially passionate about creating systems-level change that will ensure equitable access to and support for quality early childhood services. Locally, Katie's a member of the executive committee for the First Step to Equity Collaborative and sits on the Ready by 5 steering committee. She's also a member of the statewide Child Wellbeing Coalition, Kids Win Missouri, where she co-chairs the Early Childhood Priorities Work Group. And finally, Katie's also a member of the IFF's Regional Community Advisory Committee. So with that, Katie, tell us about what you know about the importance of kindergarten readiness.
Thank you, Lisa. I appreciate being here today, and this is really important work and an important conversation that we're having. So thank you for inviting me to be a part of it. I feel like this is, of course, the thing that I spend most of my days talking about now. So I will just highlight a few key points and then talk about where we're at in the St. Louis region in terms of moving towards these things. So to your first question, I mean, I think it sounds like this group does understand, you know, the lasting benefits of early childhood education and childcare and all of these experiences that are happening, you know, really prenatally, you know, to right before kindergarten. But just to quickly run through some of the benefits, we know that the positive behaviors and relationships that actually boost kindergarten readiness are developed when kids are in high quality early childhood environments. And they help to reduce the effects of toxic stressors outside of the classroom. We know that kids who are enrolled in ECE form strong social and academic skills, which help them actually be ready learners and confident learners. We hear from kindergarten teachers all the time that while they appreciate children having their, you know, ABCs and 1, 2, 3s when they come into kindergarten, it's really more about the social and emotional skills that have been developed in early childhood that really set them up for success in their kindergarten classrooms. Things like, you know, understanding the importance of being able to express your wants and needs appropriately, being able to be independent when needed, having routines and following them. All of these things lead to the ability to be ready to learn. And we know that early childhood programs also help meet children's essential health needs, you know, making sure they have their immunizations, their well checks. They get to see a doctor when they're sick. The early childhood programs can help make sure families have health insurance and health care, nutritious meals. They can begin building the healthy habits that kids and adults need throughout our lives. And early childhood programs can also, of course, help strengthen families. There are so many opportunities for connection and support, resource and referral if necessary, opportunities to learn about child development and appropriate and positive discipline. You can build advocacy and leadership skills within parents that they can then take with them into elementary school and beyond. So early childhood settings are just so powerful to create that kindergarten readiness that everyone's looking to see. And truly it can happen in so many different types of settings. You can have home-based family childcare, small, large centers. They can be for-profit or nonprofit, school district-based, church-based. There's amazing home visiting programs. And I think that the important thing to think about is what's actually happening within those settings, not so much the setting type, but we know that the quality within the settings is what is so critical to achieving those outcomes that we're trying to see when children and families leave and start elementary school. So with all of that said, all of those amazing benefits happen when the right conditions exist. So what we really set out to look for and start studying, this was about 3 years ago, was how many kids actually have access to those programs in the St. Louis region. We were looking at St. Louis City and St. Louis County. You know, who has access to what types of programs, where are they located, and who doesn't is the more important question. Who doesn't have access to these programs and why? So that's really where we started with the First Step to Equity report, which I can't remember, Lisa, did you send, you sent the links to these reports out to the group. So I won't go into too much detail. Yes, okay.
They were in the community needs assessment document that everybody received. And I'm happy to send out the link to the IFF report again, First Steps to Equity.
So thank you, Lisa. And I think, you know, this was kind of a starting point. So we wanted to say, you know, there's an abundance of research around, you know, how important early childhood experiences are for kids and for families. But what we didn't have was a more of a quantitative analysis of what actually the supply and demand looked like in St. Louis City and St. Louis County. So that was the first piece of the First Step to Equity project. we actually mapped the availability of programming, the type of programming throughout the city and the county, and we did it at a neighborhood level to really see what was going on. And what we found was not surprising to any of us who had been, you know, living and breathing this for forever, but also very concerning. We found that only 45% of children who could qualify for subsidized care had access to it, and only 19% of those children had access to a program that would be considered higher quality. So that is a very concerning number, obviously, and was really the key finding from the report. From the quantitative side of the data. We also were able to look at neighborhoods and see, and what we found was that some neighborhoods had a high quantity of providers, but maybe not so many providers who are meeting higher quality standards. There were some neighborhoods that had just a few programs, would be considered higher quality, but just not enough slots for all the kids in the community. So it really varied by neighborhood, and it's important to note that because there is not a one-size-fits-all solution that can be, you know, implemented across the board that would necessarily address the needs at a neighborhood level. So we wanted to document that. The other piece was really looking at why, you know, from the qualitative perspective, how are people experiencing this system? You know, if people are having challenges achieving high quality standards, why? If parents are having trouble accessing programs, why? What we found from parent interviews and provider interviews and focus groups and community meetings, we had all of this conversation around, you know, how people were experiencing the system. And some themes emerged. Again, they weren't surprising, but it was important to document them. And those are very much for parents. You know, there was really a lack of trust that existed in terms of, you know, feeling like, you know, unsure of what if they were trying to find a new program, for example, or if they weren't currently in a program, the search for a program is really difficult, not knowing the quality level. Being able to articulate, you know, I know how important it is for there to be, you know, it was kind of a sort of a intangible feeling that they had when they walked into a program, and they would decide whether they felt comfortable or not based on that feeling. But it was really about like, how warm are the interactions I'm having? How welcome do I feel here? You know, what kind of communication is happening? You know, all of those things parents noted as important to them. So it was really about those one-on-one relationships with the staff members and teachers within those programs. And then obviously on the contrary, it was, if I didn't get those sort of warm and fuzzy feelings right off the bat, I'm not going there. But not having any sort of objective system to look to say, I can look at this source and say this program meets high quality standards or it doesn't, because that doesn't exist for us currently in our region. So there are a lot of trust issues, a lot of fear of abuse and neglect, putting their children into programs where they feel like they were afraid abuse and neglect might occur during the day, or having already experienced abuse and neglect in programs. So, you know, being incredibly fearful that would happen again. There is also a you know, word of mouth was identified as one of the most powerful drivers of whether a program is perceived as high quality or low quality. And so once a program is either perceived as high quality, it continues to be perceived that way with word of mouth, or if it was given sort of bad word of mouth, it continues it continues on. So it's really interesting. And then and then also with parents, really important to say, you know, one of the things that was noted across the board was that, you know, parents knew what they wanted. They knew what types of programs they wanted for their kids, but their ability to choose those programs is completely hindered by whether or not they could afford to pay for them. So cost was the biggest barrier for access. Parents noted having to choose between working and putting their kids in substandard or subpar care or care situations as a very real tension that they're feeling, you know, constantly within the system. And then also, you know, the quantitative data supported this, but a lack of quality and otherwise infant toddler care across the board. It's incredibly difficult to find infant toddler care in the region.
Katie, in summary, what are we doing in this state or in this region to improve the quality and improve the affordability for families?
Yeah, so knowing all of that, I mean, I think the really important side of this was how that programs are struggling. Early childhood programs are struggling for the most part. They want to be able to do all of these things. They want to have high quality, highly trained teachers. They want to have teachers who are there, for a long time, who are retained, who are implementing research-based curriculum and assessment, and that receive all of the supports they need, but programs can't afford to do it. They just can't afford it. The business model doesn't work. There is not enough revenue flowing into these programs, and the majority of the revenue we found through the fiscal mapping that we did is on the backs of the parents. And as we know, the parents who have the least amount of access to quality are also those who would fall into our lowest income categories. And so this is just a vicious cycle. So basically, when we were moving into action, we formed all of the solutions teams. We're community-driven, parents, providers, other stakeholders involved in the system. And we landed on a set of priorities that included, of course, strengthening the workforce, improving quality, increasing access to subsidized care, making sure that equity is a priority and infused throughout all of this work, and then also family engagement. But knowing that until we get more revenue flowing into these programs, we can't achieve those things. So we turned pretty immediately into action around increasing local public investment, which is where we are today. We've launched the Ready by 5 campaign. Well, right before the pandemic, we started collecting signatures. So obviously that's not happening anymore, but we have pivoted. St. Louis City is going to be placing a measure on the ballot in November, and we're working in the county to ask the county council and Dr. Page to do the same. So we're hoping to be moving forward with a vote in November to create local dedicated funding for early childhood, 0 to 5. So that, among much state level advocacy that is needed to ensure state and federal funding, those are our true, along with all of these other things, the public investment piece of this is so critical right now.
Thank you, Katie. This is a really important work for Turn the Page STL. And as we go through our strategic planning process, I want everybody to keep kindergarten readiness and advocacy at the front and foremost part of our thinking as we move through this. Lots is happening, and I'm happy to reach out to anyone who has questions. This second, and I would say overlaps with almost all of our initiatives, is family engagement. And the research shows that supportive home learning experiences can help close the school readiness gap, and that families play the most powerful and influential roles in their children's lives as their children's first teacher, brain builder, tech navigator, advocate, and coach. We also, when we were looking here in St. Louis, districts strategically aligned family engagement in the school community as one of their highest priorities. Teachers noted that families are the first teachers of their children. In addition, teachers believe that better relationships between families and teachers will lead to student success in the classroom. We know this, but is it happening? I am very honored to introduce our next speaker, Ms. Carrie Collins. She's the Director of Education with Beyond Housing. She has dedicated her entire career to teaching in urban public schools. From 2005 to 2013, Carrie was a teacher, a special education classroom teacher, and then an instructional coach. From 2012 to 2015, she became principal first in the St. Louis Public Schools and then in the Riverview Gardens School District. In 2015, Carrie took a one-year break from urban public education after the Ferguson Uprising to study at Eden Theological Seminary, and then she returned to the St. Louis Public Schools from 2016 to 2018 to support a friend and colleague in eliminating out-of-school suspensions for students in grades K through 2. Carrie, I remember when that happened, the minute that happened, the St. Louis Public Schools, and it was wonderful. Carrie served as site coordinator for the Children's Defense Fund Freedom School at St. John's Church, the beloved community. And Carrie is going to talk about the importance of family engagement.
Thank you, Lisa. Hello, everyone. So I'm aware that Lisa's provided everyone here with background data on the importance and positive impact of family engagement and students' success in school. But I used to tell teachers and data teams that data doesn't matter without stories of the people behind the data. So, like, for example, what does it matter to know that 40% of your class passed the test if you don't know the study habits prior, their study habits, their prior knowledge, their learning style, or the barriers that each kid faces in that 40%. So when considering family engagement, or why it's even a topic for discussion, like why aren't parents instinctively engaged? Why do Beyond Housing's family engagement liaisons who are embedded in every Normandy school even have to convince school administrators and staff that we really do want schools to be welcoming, family-friendly places? We need some narratives or some stories to help us with our understandings, and I'm gonna share some of that with you. I want to side note though, and let you know that I've been a principal in what we called SIG schools. So these were the lowest performing schools in the district who received school improvement grant money, SIG money, from the state to improve, in attempts to improve the performance of the schools. So in both of those settings, we poured money into technology and into people. And when the grant money runs out, the district doesn't have the resources to maintain the technology, and nor do they have the resources to continue to employ those extra people we brought in. But I do recognize that the resource of family engagement is limitless, and you never run out of money for it. Once you get parents in there and involved, that's your key to making sure that, you know, things pass in elections, that everyone's being held accountable for doing the right thing. So with that said, I think it's first important to recognize the divide between the daily lived experience of teachers and parents. And the main driver, in my opinion, of that divide is that only around 35% of Americans have a bachelor's. Almost 100% of teachers do though. And only 13% of Americans have a master's degree, but many teachers do. And that 35% and 13% is even lower percentages for Black people and for those in lower socioeconomic statuses. Be mindful, there's some links here for websites that speak to those percentages for degrees. Be mindful that one of those websites that specifically refers to degrees for Black people is that the percentages there are the percentages of those who complete once enrolled. So it's gonna seem that it's gonna say there's something like 45 or 48%, but that's just of those individuals who enrolled in school. So that 13% for master's degree and 35% for bachelor's are the accurate percentages for those. So right off top, right from the front, we've got to recognize the potential for that reality of different to create a wedge between teachers and schools and parents. So if you have degrees, you're more likely to live a certain way compared to you. That's just the reality of this. But teachers think they're normal everyday people because they struggle, you know, not paid well. There's just a general lack of respect for their profession in general. So they think that they're normal everyday people struggling just like parents of most of their kids, but really they're not. But see, the parents, especially parents in urban school districts, they know it. They haven't forgotten that that these teachers are not living the life that they're living. So we have to recognize that it's the work of the teacher. It's the work of the school. And Katie talked about already that in pre-K, teachers in schools and teachers and early learning centers realize that it's their work to do. But once you hit K through 12, teachers forget. And honestly, most K through 12 training programs do not train teachers to engage children's families. So, but it really is their responsibility and the school's responsibility to initiate and maintain positive family engagement, to break down barriers, and to help parents see that aside from being part of only 35 or even 13% of the population, they are regular people who really want to do everything they can to help children succeed. It's also up to parents in schools teachers in schools to figure out how to share what they've learned in becoming part of that 35 or 13% with parents in a way that's meaningful. And what I'm saying there is that biology, human growth and development, and learning styles are all classes of development. They are not included in the brochures sent home after giving birth, right? So, and then here's just what I recognized as a principal, just the reality. No matter how unfortunate it is, it's real. And that is that teachers pay more attention to whose parents are involved. If a teacher doesn't want to have to answer questions of why not, what went wrong, and to avoid all that, they're going to do everything they can to make sure everything goes right for a kid who's they know that parent is going to come to them if there is a problem. And it's unfortunate, but that's a reality. So family involvement starts with breaking down barriers. And I've got some narratives, some stories, and personal stories for you on that, on breaking down those barriers. And one of them I'll refer to as the weed dad story. So I had a student when I was principal one year who just had daily discipline concerns all the time. And so I was often calling his parents for support. And it got to the point where the phone calls weren't helping and I just needed a parent to come up. So the dad would come up and reek of marijuana every time he came up, and the office staff just lost it. They couldn't stand it. They made comments, they rolled their eyes at him. It was just not a welcoming environment for him. So I would, attempt to deter and calm their responses and pull him into my office and talk with him. And I never once mentioned the smell, right? The aroma coming from his person. We just talked about the kid. And it got to the point, probably by the time he was in my office the fourth time, we had built a relationship. I did the work to break down the barriers between us two. And I said to him, after we talked, I said, can you do me a favor and stop coming to my school smelling like weed? Can you do that for me? And he was like, I'm sorry, Miss Collins. This is just really nerve-wracking for me. I hated school. I did not like, had to go to the principal's office all the time and I hated it. So this is really my way of even getting here. Because if I didn't do this, I don't know if I'd even make it through the door for you. And I told him, but you can, we've built this. So try, at least give it a try the next time I call you up here. And he did. And it worked out. He was nervous. He was sweating. He was shaking, but he eventually built up his, I guess you would call it, stamina for coming to school sober whenever he needed to. And it really worked out well for that student as well. I'm not gonna, give the impression that everything was perfect. Like that kid eventually got to 0 discipline incidents, but that kid did realize that home and school were on the same page. And if we had to call home was gonna support us, in helping this kid be more successful. So that's one. There's another
Carrie,
one I'll call, yeah.
A quick one, and then we'll wrap it up.
Sure. And I don't, That's probably enough, but I've got a quick one too for, we call it, I'll call her Brawl Mom. So as a new principal in Riverview, I asked staff members, what are some parents I really need to know about? And they brought up this mother who every morning brought her daughter to school, but didn't wear, you know, an undergarment with it. I found this mom, built a relationship with her over several weeks, and was able to one morning ask her to come to my office. She was like, sure, Ms. Collins, what do you need? What do you need? And I said, I need you to wear a bra when you bring your daughter to school. Turns out this mom works an overnight shift, and her daughter's embarrassed of her mom's uniform from her overnight shift job. So as soon as the mom gets home, she disrobes from her uniform, and just to be comfortable, includes, you know, her undergarment, and throws on, you know, a t-shirt and some pants to bring her kid to school. All this time, these teachers are down, the school full of teachers are downing this mom because she's doing what we ask all parents to do, and that's be involved in their kids' school experience. And it was a simple thing for her to realize that this was a distraction when she came to school. So, but then we had to do the work of building that relationship for her and all the staff, because she was mad at all of them for not even saying anything to her about it, and just, you know. So hopefully that gives you some insight to the importance and the work that needs to be done to build relationships so that families can feel comfortable being involved and engaged.
Thank you, Carrie. One thing that Beyond Housing has done is they have paid for 2 family engagement liaisons at every single school in the Normandy School District. And it is an incredible program that I would like to see replicated in other school districts. I am going to go ahead and put up the poll for you to, hopefully that worked. And I'm going to end this session by saying I thank you so much, everyone, for coming, and please fill out this poll. Next week is our final session where we're going to have 3 guest speakers talking about teacher preparedness, summer learning, and attendance. I can't thank Katie Ron enough and Carrie Collins for their expertise, and I feel like we can reach out to both of you anytime as we're going through this work, and making sure that these 2 topics are at the forefront of our mind when we move forward. Thank you guys for filling out that poll. Like I said, we say it every week, we are still in the data collection. We are collecting the data, and in July, you're going to hear about this next week. We're going to start getting into the root causes, and with your support, everyone on this call, among others, we are going to get to a strategic plan that can improve 3rd grade reading proficiency. So thank you very much. If you have any additional questions, please feel free to email me, and I can always forward questions that you might have for Katie and Carrie. So thank you, and have a wonderful